Good evening and welcome to tonight's edition of Fact Sheet live on ETV, live on Facebook, live on Instagram and live on NISM 95.9 and 100.1 on Facebook. You can look for us using the handle ETV Ghana and you can let your thoughts, your views be heard today, even as we deliberate on the subject matter for this evening, which has to do with the passage of the E-Levy Act. Now, this afternoon, Parliament passed the E-Levy bill into a law. After weeks of several attempts at passing this law, today the law was passed. The controversy surrounding this law, from 1.75 to 1.5, the issues about sabotage by the minority in Parliament, finally, the dust settled today. But did it really settle today, considering that the minority in Parliament raised issues about how they were ambushed when the E-Levy was presented with a state of urgency and it was required for them to pass that law. They staged a walkout. That did not deter the majority in Parliament to pass that bill into a law. As we speak now, the minority have indicated that they are certainly going to go to the Supreme Court on the matter of the passage of the E-Levy. It becomes important for us as a nation to then begin to ask ourselves what lies ahead of us, considering that all of us have been complaining about the hardships in the country. The government made an effort to mitigate the concerns we are raising. Some 15 pesos was taken from how much we buy fuel, that's diesel and petrol at the pump. But did that suffice in terms of the mitigation measures the government took? Tonight we will attempt to understand what happened in Parliament today and what lies ahead of us, seeing that many raise questions about the passage of the E-Levy. What awaits us? We'll try to understand from the perspective of the minority, from the perspective of the majority, and then from the perspective of an economist and that of an IT person. Remember, there had been the indication that when this law is passed, there was the possibility of around 25% of Ghanaians who are on this platform to leave the platform. Would we see the realization of that? And if it does happen, what happens to government's dream of raising some 7 million Ghana cedis to augment its budget allocations that it's made? That forms the basis for our conversation tonight, live on ETV, live on Fact Sheet. I encourage you to let your thoughts be heard tonight. My name is Samuel Ishe. We'll take a short breather. When we come back, we will introduce our guest to you, and then it will set the ball rolling for our conversation tonight.
So, Mr. Speaker, this side, we don't support E-Levy. We will not support E-Levy. Count us out of it. They can proceed with whatever business they want to attack. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
And so I proceed to put the question. Those in favor of the adoption of the report of the committee in support of the second reading of the Electronic Transaction Levy Bill 2021, say aye. Those against, say no. Honorable members, the ayes have it. Honorable members, the Electronic Transfer Levy Bill 2021, duly read the third time and passed.
And welcome back to Fact Sheet live on ETV, live on NISM 95.9 and 100.1. We're happy to have you join us tonight as we try to understand what happened in Parliament today and what lies ahead of us now that the law has been passed. We are joined by the Honourable Member of Parliament tonight for the Buem constituency. The Honourable Kofi Adams joined us to tell us what happened in Parliament, considering that this was passed under a certificate of urgency and the minority raised concerns about how they were ambushed. We will try to understand what they did. Honourable, good evening and thanks so much for joining us.
Good evening and thank you for the opportunity to join you on this very important subject and to make a case for the minority and majority of Ghanaians who thought what happened today shouldn't have happened.
So make us understand, you raised concerns about how you were ambushed with the introduction of the bill for consideration under a certificate of urgency. How was that possible?
Well, Parliament has structured works with rules, and for every Friday, our standing orders provides that the chair of the business committee present business for ensuing week, which normally starts from Tuesday and terminates on Friday. So consistently for the past 3 or 4 weeks, we in the minority side have asked the majority leader and chairman of the business committee or whoever presents business statement on his behalf every Friday about when the E-Levy was going to be introduced properly and appropriately for us to consider it at least for the second reading. We have never had an answer. Some time passed. I can't remember the dates actually. Some business statements that were presented captured the E-Levy as an item to be considered for a particular day. Since then, it vanished. So on Friday, again, when the business statement was presented on behalf of the chairman of the business committee by the majority chief whip, Honorable Anodompre, nothing was said as far as E-Levy is concerned. What we were told was the president's appearance in the House tomorrow to present a message on the state of the nation. However, we got to Parliament today, and in the order paper for today's business, we found E-Levy as one of the items or motions advertised to be taken through the second reading. It was a surprise for us, but we got ourselves ready. We mobilized ourselves, went to the chamber, waiting for that time. Ministers who were supposed to appear to answer questions didn't come. So business of the day was varied to take that motion. The finance minister was called upon to move the motion for the second reading. It was moved, seconded, and we raised an earlier objection that we do not have our copies of the report of the Finance Committee of Parliament. And so it was impossible for us to participate in a debate or follow the debate without having copies of the Finance Committee report. And two, the majority leader tried to defend his side that last year the Finance Committee report was distributed to members. Some of our colleagues argue that yes, they had copies, but because the business statement that was approved on Friday did not give any indication that we were going to consider the E-Levy bill today for the second reading, they did not pick their copies. And so if that is the argument that they want carried, then we must suspend sitting so we could go back to our offices and pick copies. Not knowing they had some copies there, and so Mr. Speaker ordered for copies to be made available. So the debate then continued. We stated our case that there was an agreement that 4 persons would contribute. So the chair of the Finance Committee, in a way, supported the motion moved by the Finance Minister. Then it came to our side, our ranking stated our case clearly, which we all listened to. Then it went back to them. The Deputy Finance Minister, Abena, spoke in defense of E-Levy. Then it came back to us when Isaac Adongo also spoke, exposing the loopholes and how bad that levy would be if passed, if allowed to pass in the form that it is. It went back to them. Honorable Kojo Oponkroma made his statement. Then it came back to us, and Honorable John Jinapo, who was the third person to contribute from our side. Then after his contribution, Mr. Speaker decided to suspend the House for 30 minutes. And when he resumed, it was now the turn of leadership to wind up. So at that stage, when the minority leader spoke to the levy and the bill as presented, he, at the end of his presentation, made it clear to the House that, considering what had gone on and all that there is, he and his side, the 137, the minority, can no longer participate in anything to do with the E-Levy consideration. And so we did not stay to participate in the second readings state motion to be put. So Mr. Speaker did not put the motion on the second reading before we walked out, because the majority leader was supposed to speak after the minority leader has concluded the debate from our side. So whilst he was on his feet, we elected to walk out from the chamber.
All right, so clarify this for me. At the time you raised objections about the introduction of the E-Levy, what was the Speaker's position, if indeed you felt ambushed and that it had not been one of the items you expected to be dealt with today?
Well, he made it very clear that he was not expecting it to be on the order paper today, but considering the importance of the bill for both sides and Ghanaians, generally having discussed it at length and wanting finality on it, he was going to allow for us to take the bill through the second reading and, if possible, conclude it today. Since it was introduced and in December, after the Finance Minister presented the 2022 budget statement and was referred after the first reading to the Finance Committee, and the Finance Committee report was to have been considered on the 17th of December 2021. And it was that consideration that brought about the disturbances in the House, and we adjourned the next day without considering it. So the understanding is that, well, the request to consider it under certificate of urgency still holds.
All right.
And so it could be, you could proceed to consider it within a day by relaxing other rules that governs the introduction of bills.
Now, kindly let's move on to post-Parliament, and some document that trending on social media, which suggests that The minority has gone to the Supreme Court, all raising issues about the Supreme Court's own position on quorum when it comes to government business and voting. Is what we're reading on social media true, that you are going to court or you are in court?
Well, clearly, the Supreme Court not too long ago made some decisions and orders or directives that have to be obeyed and complied by everybody. Because when it comes to issues of interpretation of the Constitution, that is in the bosom of the Supreme Court. And once they make a pronouncement, it is for all other courts below them and all other bodies and institutions within this republic to obey those orders. The Supreme Court clearly took the 1992 Constitution of our republic and looked at Article 102 and Article 104. Article 104 indicated clearly that Parliament works with two quorums. One is a quorum to do business, which is 1/3 of all the members of Parliament. Meaning, if you had about 92 members of Parliament present, Parliament can go ahead to conduct business, such as sit and people will make statements. Questions can be asked of ministers. You can do all other business of Parliament if you have 92 members present. That is the 1/3 to form. And there is a quorum for decision, which finds its presence in Article 104, which says you must have at least more than half the total number of members of Parliament present before you can take a decision. And that any decision that is taken with a number that is less than half means that that decision is null and void. The Supreme Court even went further when it spoke on the matters to do with whether a deputy speaker who is a member of Parliament presiding could vote or not vote, and therefore ordered that the standing order provision 1093 be striked out and be declared as unconstitutional, because that standing order provision says a deputy speaker or a member presiding will not have a right to vote. So, per the Supreme Court ruling, which we all as Ghanaians understood, Parliament cannot take a decision if we are less than 138. We must always be 138 or more to be able to take a decision. Right. Considering the total membership of Parliament, our side has 137, the MPP side have 137, and an independent that is caucusing with them, making them 138. It is clear that one member of the majority side is currently out of Ghana. She's not within the jurisdiction, so she was not in Parliament. Honorable Sarah Adjoa Safo, MP for Domi Kwabinya, she's currently not around and therefore was not in Parliament. So that brings the number of the majority side to 137, assuming without admitting that all of them were present. So by our walkout, the number left in the chamber to continue with business, if all of them, all the rest were present, will be 137. And that number falls short of the 138 quorum that is needed to take a decision for the second reading and the consideration and the third reading. Because considerations is also based on decision. Each article is read and voted on. Either it is approved or rejected. So all those ones are decisions. So what it means is that all the decisions that were taken during the consideration stage, the second reading and the third reading must be declared null and void because the numbers were not up to 138 for that decision to be taken.
All right. Now, let me ask.
This is moving on the basis that our colleague who is not well, Honorable Ebenezer Kojokum, MP for Ahanta West, who is not well, was present. But even at the time we walked out, he was nowhere in the chamber. And we were very much aware. We spotted a number of our colleagues at the tunnel, meaning that they were also not in the chamber, who are members of the majority side, who were not in the chamber. So if any question was put for the consideration of this bill for the second reading, if Mr. Speaker put the question, he would have put the question for far less a number than even 137.
All right, so that's where the tricky part is, because the Honorable Speaker of Parliament has been in Parliament for a while. He's a lawyer, and he knew about the Supreme Court's ruling and their position on the matter of quorum for voting on such an important matter as the E-Levy. Why then did he allow for the voting to happen, seeing that the numbers did not add up?
Actually, Mr. Speaker's role, his key role is to preside over proceedings. Even if members of parliament are just 90 and nobody raises quorum, Mr. Speaker will preside over proceedings and even decisions will be taken. But that does not stop anybody who is placed with the information and the facts that a decision so taken was taken when Parliament was not properly constituted to take that decision, from advancing to court or even advancing those arguments on the floor of the House. You can choose both or choose one.
All right.
So for Mr. Speaker, if somebody had raised quorum, then Mr. Speaker will order the clerks at table to do a head count for him, to be informed that the House is not appropriately constituted to take a decision. But unfortunately for him, all of us walked out, because even if we had kept one person and they are able to marshal their 137, including our colleague who is not well, because we knew Honorable Sarah Joasafu was not around and therefore cannot be in the chamber. If they marshal their 137 and we kept one person to stay and raise quorum, that person will be added to 137 and that will give them a decision number of 138.
Interesting. Now, let me ask my final question, and that has to do with your recourse to the courts. I remember just this week there have been statements that your flag bearer has been making as to the NDC's feeling about how the justice system has been and how they feel that rulings have not been going as, for them should go. So I ask, why resort to an entity that, for want of a better word, has been hostile towards your party? Do you expect justice from the courts?
Well, we'll go to court expecting justice. And if we don't get the justice, at least Ghanaians will know that we fought this fight to its logical conclusion. The same court not too long ago have made pronouncement and quoting copiously the provisions in the Constitution. If the same court will tell us 2 months later that Article 104, which they quoted, that is the article that Parliament must consider in taking decision, and that you need at least half the total number of members of Parliament to take a decision, is no longer applicable, and that they are departing from their own ruling or directives that they gave not too long ago, Ghanaians will see it. And so we are hoping to have justice so that Ghanaians can have justice. If they decide not to give justice and they do otherwise, Ghanaians would have seen what we did.
All right. Honorable, I'll beg you to hold on for a second for me and let me speak to your colleague, Dr. Kingsley Nyako, who is the Member of Parliament for Kwadaso, and pick his thoughts on what happened in Parliament today so we can hear or have a balanced conversation tonight. Honorable, it's good to have you tonight on Fact Sheet.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Well, good evening.
Good evening to you too. So let me take the majority's position on the walkout by the minority and the concerns they are raising about the lack of quorum for a decision to be taken as to the passing of the bill into a law.
Yeah. It is their legitimate constitutional right to boycott proceedings in the House. But I think that there was no, it was not necessary. They should have been there for them to make inputs into the bill. Because if you look at other paper, you see that there were amendments proposed by members from their side, particularly Minority Leader Haruna Jusu, Muntaka, and all that. So for me, they should have been there, but they decided to walk away, and we don't have any issues about that. They're right. But the issue of quorum, for me, I'm amazed because remember, the day they purported to have rejected the budget, they didn't have a quorum at that time, but they insisted that they were right. Do you remember? I think it was 7th of November. They insisted, they quoted all the relevant laws, and they backed that what they did was right. And we came back with, they were about 137, came back later with 138 to how they did. Today, after record, that during the debating period, when Haruna introduced to the minority leader, he said that after listening to the majority leader, they will walk away. But when he was done, he didn't even wait for the majority leader to even speak. And then he left, and they followed him. At that time, majority leader should have made a submission, but he said no. He declined. He said he was not going to make any submission, and prayed the speaker to put a question. Before the speaker put the question, there were some of the members of the NDC in the chamber. Go and watch the video. You see, they were there. About 10 of them were there. They were about everything, but they were at that time in the chamber. So there is no issue about lack of quorum. There was quorum at the time the speaker put the question. There's no doubt about that.
All right, hold on 1 second for me, Honorable. So if you saw NDC members of Parliament in the chamber for which you count them as being present, who did you see?
Yes, no.
1 second, who did you see?
Listen, my brother. I'm saying that there were some of the NDC members who were about to exit the chamber. They were there. I remember I saw John Dinapo there, my good friend, and others. He's the one I can sing out because he's a good friend. But I'm saying that documentary evidence, the videos that will let us know that some of them were in the chamber before the question was. That was why our leader was saying that speaker should put the question, and he did. But for me, the E-Levy has been passed. What is important for me is how do we ensure that the proceeds from the E-Levy are used to better the lot of the citizens and improve the fortunes of the country. And I want to, implore our friends on the other side that, we should move on. We should make progress. We should make progress. What has happened today, and especially when Blaster has qualified to represent us in the World Cup. They should let all this in line. Let's move forward. Let's see how we can use the E-Levy to make this country better and shore up the economy. For me, that's the bottom line.
All right. Now, let me ask this. Now that it's been passed, and we expect that it will come into force for the citizenry to, be paying per the transactions and the regulations working with it. Now, what I want to ask is, if the projection is to raise 6.9 million, let's say totaling 7 million at the end of the year, And then we have been told that per your simulations that you have done, for which the Deputy Finance Minister was quoted in the tabloids as saying that 25% of Ghanaians are likely to go off the system. And with the complaints that Ghanaians had raised, do you think that at the end of the day, the realization of the revenue mobilization you want to do, you'll be able to do them?
The projection for the E-Levy, if it had taken effect on the planned date, would have given us close to 7 billion, right?
Yep.
That was projection. Could have been more or less. Okay? And because of what has happened, we might not be able to get that figure, or we can even go beyond that, depending on, the volume of transaction and all that. I mean, what is important is that the E-Levy has become part of our revenue stream. It's not only for this fiscal year. Okay? I mean, it's going to be something that is part of that. So, as we are moving on, and we even get 4 billion CDs every year for 5 years, it's not 20 billion, my brother. And this 20 billion for 5 years, can do something meaningful for this country. Can us resorting to, the credit market and all that. Okay, so let us not only look at what we are supposed to get this year. Let us also look at what we are going to get from subsequent years. I mean, that is what we need to look at.
All right, but wouldn't it be fair for somebody to make the case that, considering how young the industry is in terms of the mobile money transactions, and the fact that there are indications that people might jump off that platform with the introduction of the law?
You see, my brother, these are speculations.
No, but they are not speculations, sir. Hold on one second.
No, you said might. If you say might is not absolute.
Yes.
You say you should say might, use that word. Might is not somebody that is enforceable. Might. So for me, what is important is that it is likely, or it's possible that some people might decide not to use it. Okay? But what will be the effect on the overall benefit of the policy? How to be the numbers? Is it also possible that when people see that it provides comfort, okay, it provides flexibility, so they would decide to be part of this new intervention? Why are we not looking at how to get people to appreciate it and use it than to suggest that people might not use it? And any policy intervention, if the implementer sees that there are some loopholes, I'm sure reasonably the implementer will see how those loopholes or gaps can be leveled. That's it. You don't expect everybody to be on the system. I mean, if you did that, then you're not being realistic to yourself. Okay? There might be hatred. But bottom line, what will be the end result of this intervention? Will it benefit us? If it benefits us, then let us all go for it. And I'm sure those teaching pages, if government sees some of the deficiencies, I'm sure government will find a way of addressing it. Government is not bringing this policy, to create problems for us. The essence of the policy is to help this country and our economy become better. All other issues that have to be dealt with, I'm persuaded that the implementer of the policy will deal with it.
All right. Now, before I move on to my next question, just to clarify the point that I wasn't speculating, but I was telling you what Mr. John Kuma had said. Now, he is quoted as saying, the research we did also told us that there will be about 24% attrition rate in the 3 months or 6 months that we introduce the E-Levy. The research same told us that we should be done to bring back these people after a while. So this is Mr. John Kuma being quoted, not necessarily me speculating.
No, I think that, but you see, what you said and what John Kuma also said, I think so. Because then John Kuma is talking about initial challenges, which is normal. If you implement any policy, you are more likely to experience, because some people will be skeptical and all that. This is happening. That was why he said that in the interim, They'll expect that. But as we move on, these setbacks will be overcome.
All right.
You know what I mean? For me, I think that makes sense.
Final one. When is this law coming into effect? When should Ghanaians be ready to start paying the E-Levy?
You know, the bill was brought under certificate of urgency order 119 of outstanding orders and Article 10613 of the Constitution. The certificate of urgency. So the president will attend to it. I don't know the start date from the implementer, but I'm sure it's going to be as soon as practicable.
Doc, well, thank you for making time to speak to us tonight on Fact Sheet.
Thanks for having me. Very grateful. Have a good night.
Good night to you too, sir. We would make a U-turn, and when we come back, we'll speak to Professor Lord Mensah and pick his thoughts about the passage of the E-Levy and how necessarily that's going to transform our economy. Remember that the finance minister's projected revenue target is over 100 billion. And the component of the E-Levy is around 7 billion. So people ask the question, without it, are we saying that we can't build our nation? We will attempt to get answers. We'll be right back. And you're welcome back to Fact Sheet Live on ETV. I was hoping to speak to Professor Lord Mensah, but we still do have on the line the Honorable Kofi Adams, and he wants to make a comment or two before we switch to the Honorable Professor. Honorable, you want to clarify some points your colleague made. What are these issues?
Just 2 points.
Okay.
One, the minority leader, Honorable Haruna Idrisu, never said in his presentation, and you have played that we will walk out only after the majority leader has said his point as part of the debate. 2, at the time our side considered the decision we took on the 26th November 2021 as far as the rejection of the budget was concerned, the Supreme Court has not made any pronouncement on the subject of quorum per Article 102 and then 104. So now that the Supreme Court has spoken, our position then and the position of the majority side is no longer the issue. It is the interpretation that has been given by the Supreme Court that governs all of us. You remember it was the same thing that applied the year 2020. We were all arguing on the usage of birth certificates for registration as a voter or not. When the Supreme Court made its pronouncement, we all have to abide by it, whether we earlier thought it was wrong or right. It was no more the case. It was the decision of the Supreme Court that all parties have to follow. So I don't see why my colleague will now bring our defense of the 26th November 2021 decision when the Supreme Court now have ruled, and we have a basis upon which to talk about quorum for decision and quorum for doing business.
All right. Final one before you take leave of us. He says that the 138 you speak about, he saw some members on your side in the chamber at the time that the voting was being done. And he mentions Honorable Jinapo that he saw. And so maybe your attention was not drawn to the fact that some of your members were in the chamber at the time this happened. Your response?
Well, that is neither here nor there. Assuming without even admitting that at the second reading question stage of the consideration of this bill, he found somebody. What about the consideration stage when article by article decisions were made? Was Honorable Jinapo there? No. And that is also decision. Actually, the highest decision is not the second reading. It is the third reading where the bill is considered to have been passed. And at that decision, the third reading, none of us were in there. If he claimed that we were walking out and he saw the back of John Jinapo who was walking out when the speaker put the question for the second reading, what about the consideration of the various clauses? And then the third reading, which was the final one. What about that one also? So clearly, they engaged in an illegality. They engaged in an illegality. They've done something against the Constitution and against the directives of the Supreme Court.
Honorable, I thank you tonight for making time to join us.
Thank you.
And that's Honorable Kofi Adams joining us tonight on the show. Quickly, let's have a conversation with Professor Lord Mensah and ask him what all this brouhaha about the E-Levy means for our revenue mobilization drive. Prof, good evening and thank you very much for joining us. Hello, good evening, Prof.
Good evening. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Good.
Now, after weeks of, controversies about the E-Levy, finally, it's been passed at a rate of 1.5. Now, what does this mean for government revenue mobilization drive?
Well, for now, we've gone beyond the hassle of whether it should be passed or it shouldn't be passed.
Indeed.
For me, it's going to enhance government's revenue mobilization. Because if you are to go by the projections that was given, we're looking at 7 billion in addition to the government's revenue, which for me is an addition to government's new platform of raising revenue. And of course, if we are to go by the numbers, I think it boosts the confidence of investors out there that government has gotten at least additional cash flows, which more or less will be of a lesser risk. But then also, let's look at the sensitivity of the usage of the Momo compared to the platform, compared to the fees that are charged on this platform. So far, in the Ghanaian context, nobody has tested that kind of, sensitivity. Whether when a fee is added on to the normal one that the telcos charged, it would deter people from using the platform, or whether people will still go on using the platform. Nobody has come up with any figures. We haven't tested the sensitivities yet. So this is purely a true test of how, levies onto the digital platform, customers and all those individuals who use the platform are going to react. So let's see in the month or two time how people are going to fare. But then also, let's not forget that people still have that kind of classical way of transferring funds, off head. We started using this mobile, transfers and all those not long ago. And so we still have the memories of, the classical way of doing, transfer. And in fact, some people have not even moved on to the platform yet because of the education level and then the sophistication and all those that goes with it. And so let's see how it's going to play. I think if it plays very well, it's an avenue, which I would say that government comes, government goes. That's going to be a new economic, drive, because the digital space is something that is, going to move economies, globally. And so if we are tapping into it now, let's see how it goes. Then, possibly, if it turns out to be too sensitive in terms of usage, relating the usage to the levy, then probably we may have to look at the threshold that was charged. If this current threshold, which is about 1.5, in addition to the 1% that the telcos charges, and I've been told they're going to sacrifice 0.25% of it, which will come down to 0.75%. If you add it to the 1.75, then we should look at around 2.25, percent thereabout. And so effectively, every single person that is using the platform should be ready to pay this amount. And if we can go on using it, let's see how it goes. And the government is targeting, 7 billion. But then let's also look at on the flip side. You see, this is also a true test for the government. We also look at, the usage of the proceeds that comes in as far as these E-levies are concerned. This levy has gone back and forth because people were concerned about the usage because it's an earmark fund. Now, as we speak, we're thinking about in the next 7 to 12 months, we should see more jobs being created. We should see funds being channeled through the banks and people walking to the bank comfortably to access funds to expand their business. They were all part of the E-levy usage.
All right.
We should see roads being constructed. We should see because road tolls have been removed and all those. And so effectively, the expectations on this E-levy is massive. So if Ghanaians have been squeezed and we're going to pay for it, I think accountability will be very, very key going forward.
All right.
And so the government should be careful, how these funds are going to be used. Very, very important,
All right.
going
Prof,
forward.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Unfortunately, our time very much exhausted, and I'm grateful that you join us tonight on Fact Sheets. A repeat broadcast of the show will be on, God willing, tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. I encourage you to watch it if you didn't get the chance to, or if you joined the discussion late tonight. I was joined on the phone lines by Mr. Kofi Adams, who is the Member of Parliament for Buem constituency, Professor Lord Mensah, who is a lecturer at University of Ghana, and Dr. Kingsley Nyako, who is a Member of Parliament for Kwada. So on that note, I thank you for joining us tonight. Production team, I thank you as well. Good night.